Let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining. Appreciate all of you taking time out of your days to join us for this webinar. I hope all of you are doing well and staying safe. I am really excited today to have Sowmya talk about the pesticide paradox. I'm really curious about what this is and looking forward to learning a lot about this interesting concept. Before we get started, maybe let me just go through a few small housekeeping items. So first off, the webinar will run for 60 minutes. It is being recorded and we will share the recording with all of you, and it will also be available on our YouTube channel. So you will be able to check it out a few days after the webinar is over. You will be able to submit questions. I will share a process shortly on how you can do that. What we'll also do is we'll save about 15 minutes in the end of the webinar to try and address as many of your questions as possible. Quickly, just wanted to walk through a little bit about BrowserStack before I hand it over to Sowmya. So we've been around for about a little over 10 years now. We launched in 2011 and we hit our first 1,000 customers in 6 months. And I think the genesis for BrowserStack was our co-founders Ritesh and Nakul built a website for their business, and then they were trying to figure out how to test their website on Internet Explorer back in the day, and they were not able to do that because they were both developing on Macs, and they couldn't figure out how to do it, and it took them longer to test their website than actually to build their website. And that was the brainchild to start BrowserStack. And literally the first version of BrowserStack supported just IE, and we've not looked back since then. In 10 years, we've launched support for many different operating systems on Windows and Windows and Mac. We've also launched testing on real iOS and Android devices. You can also test your native mobile apps. We also raised recently, last year in June, we raised our Series B round at a $4 billion valuation. We've got 900 plus employees now. I think we're close to 1,000 now. And I think offices where we are remote first now. So all of our employees are working remotely. We do have offices in San Francisco, in Dublin, Ireland, and Mumbai and New York. So we maintain offices on an as-needed basis. We've got over 50,000 customers across all of the verticals. The who's who, all the blue chip brands across all the different verticals are customers who use BrowserStack to test their websites and mobile apps. We support a huge number of open source projects on our platform. So we power the internet basically, right? A lot of the most popular open source projects that you might have heard of use BrowserStack to test their code. We've got over 4 million registered users now who run over 72 billion Selenium commands every year. Customers with from over 135 countries, and we've got 15 globally distributed data centers. Some of the world's largest cloud providers rely on BrowserStack to test their software. And I wanted to just quickly talk about our products, and then I'll hand it over to Sowmya. So we've got products across web testing, testing your websites, products to help you test your mobile apps, and we've got a variety of free tools. On the website, you can do your interactive or manual cross-browser testing on live, both on different desktop browsers and on real mobile devices, right? So you can test Chrome on real Android devices and iOS devices. You can test Safari on real iOS devices. Automate is our automated web testing product, which is our Selenium grid on the cloud. Again, harnessing the same set of browsers and real iOS and Android devices. And Percy is our latest addition. We allow now not only to test how a website functions, but also how it looks, right? So you can visually compare your website against benchmark screenshots to understand, how it's being rendered on different browsers and at different resolutions. On the mobile app side, we've got App Live, which allows you to test your iOS and Android apps. And on the automated testing side, we've got App Automate, which allows you to run your Appium, Espresso, and XUI tests on real iOS and Android devices. And we've got a variety of free tools for you to test how your websites look, how it renders across different screen resolutions. And also Speed Lab allows you to understand how your website performs across different browsers and devices. Just a quick intro on how to do submit questions today. So what you need to do is go to slido.com, enter the event code that you see on the screen, which is 522514. And that will take you to an interface where you can submit your questions. And the nice thing is, you don't need to submit a question that's already been asked. You can see all the questions that have already been asked, and you can just upvote. So we'll automatically pick the questions that are the most popular, and we'll try to cover as many of them as possible. Awesome. I think before I hand it over to Sowmya, you will see a poll being popped up on the screen. We just wanted to understand a little bit about your level of test automation in your organization, and also some of the areas that you want to focus on in terms of improvement in your test environment. So just take a few seconds to answer that poll. It will help us understand what are the kind of topics you're interested in, and how we can sort of customize our future webinars to solve some of these problems. Awesome. Let me now introduce Sowmya. So Sowmya is an SDET manager at Lytho with 13 years of experience, and she's handled quality for a variety of different software solutions, including ERP, SaaS, mobile apps, and web applications. I've interacted with her in the past at other events, and she's got some really interesting insights. Just built on a lot of solid experience working across so many different spaces. She's got a proven track record of implementations, really focusing on results-driven test processes, mentoring test teams, and helping teams achieve great ROI with their automation, right? She's also an advocate for accessibility. I think all of us understand the importance of building the internet, to be able to building the internet which is accessible for all, right? Whether it's the websites, whether it's the web or mobile apps. And I think she's really advocated for inclusive software development. With that, Sowmya, I will stop my share and hand it over to you.
Thanks, Praveen. That was a wonderful intro of myself. So kind of having my time to shine here. There we go. So what I see on my screen is the poll screen, which is not moving. Okay, I kind of sorted it out. Happens. Yeah, right. So, yeah. Okay. So hello, everybody. Thanks for joining and for your time. So today I'll be talking a little story about our experience with regards to Pesticide Paradox that we had in our team. It's something that everyone would have passed through or will be living right now at this moment in your day-to-day testing journey. Or maybe if you started off the journey as a tester newly, at some point in your career, you may land up. So let's start what I have for you in store. So a little bit about me, apart from what Praveen gave in intro, is for living, I'm an SDET manager at Lytho, but I drive accessibility very close to my heart. So the main challenge in the wider team, in the development teams now, is they don't understand, or they're not educated basically about the accessibility. It's mostly seen as an overhead as a part of the development, but it's actually not. It's a shared responsibility. So I drive more closely this initiative with all development teams that I work. I also educate, mentor, and guide them. I also try and participate very actively in community building, and everyone who would like to take their leap into the IT testing as their experience. I also give a helping hand and participate in the community building, like I said. Last but not the least is automation. I'm a firm believer in technology and technology-driven solutions, especially in our testing arena. If there is anything technology-based which can reduce our overall effort, or something that can bring in a fresh perspective into our day-to-day life, I'll be more interested, and I keep trying something new every day. I'm taking a baby steps in also writing a small blog of all my experiences. Wish I could have done it a little before, but anyways, better late than never. So yeah, please drop by, provide your feedback, inputs, and anything that you would like to hear from me. I would like to pen it down. So in today's agenda, I would like to walk you through my story. In fact, our story of our team, of what the pesticide paradox is, and what were the challenges that we had as a part of the team? How did we get together, and the ways we try to churn out some viable solutions, the solutions that actually work, that we try to implement, the challenges that we had, and finally maybe a Q&A if you want to know a little bit more, dive deeper into the journey about that. So for the benefit of the wider group, let's first see what is a pesticide paradox. So I'll just quote directly from the slide. If the same set of test cases are executed over and over again, at the period of time, those set of test cases are no more capable enough to identify new defects in the system. So what does it say is, this does not happen in the backdrop of new feature development. Whenever you're creating a new features, whenever it comes for the testing, there's a lot that's happening. We are way too busy doing things. But as the code advances to the next environment and we pick up the regression test, it becomes a challenging task for the team. Why? One, because of the coverage, because the code grows, the test arena also grows. And the second thing is, we pretty much kind of do the same thing over and over again just to check, okay, application is working and it's not being disrupted by the new code. But there's one other thing, that the one other aspect that we are missing here is, we stop mining for bugs. Because new code is coming, new feature is coming, there are scenarios which gets widened up, and there are far unreachable corners which we don't even go to check if it is even failing. So pesticide paradox exactly mentions that you kind of stop mining for bugs. And that was pretty much our case as well. So what is the recommended solution? The initial recommended solution right out of the books was to come up with the new test cases every time, more frequently or regularly. Yeah, this is nice to hear that we have to come up with some new test cases, but how? Is it that we have to sit and write and then assume, okay, these were the use cases, these are the test cases, maybe instead of going left, I take right? I don't know, kind of assuming. And that's what we did for the first few months. But then we kind of like started seeing corners everywhere. Our juices stopped flowing. We no more had creativity in our tests. So when we looked at our overall bug cycle or the bugs being reported, we did not have any meaningful bugs. Mostly it was a low priority or something like some UI is failing, or the known issues which was fixed in the last sprint opened up because of the new code. We kind of hit the corner all over again. So we had to come up with something that was more creative and also keep up the motivation of our test team. They were like kind of, okay, fine, it's regression, let's do it. And it's the same thing over and over again. So before I get into or jump into explaining the story, I would like to do some story setting to give you a little bit more example or information about what the story setting basically was. It is our application is a B2B application, which basically caters to domain-rich, feature-specific organizations, mostly from professional services to oil and gas, to transportation management, warehouse management. It can be any of these businesses who will be using our software to their day-to-day work, to support their day-to-day work. So the characters in this story is mostly the QA group. So we were a scaled agile team. We had 5 teams, in fact, and one was specifically for UX. But however, we had 5 delivery teams. And so each team had at least 2 testers. So pretty much 10 testers overall in the team. And it was a good mix of both fresh starters, interns, super experienced, and I mean, pretty much all at all levels of testers were there. And the situation that we had was, which I just explained, that we kept on delivering features. And like I said, it's a feature intensive, a heavy domain specific kind of an application, a B2B application. We had multiple modules communicating with each other. And it was the breadth and the depth of the application was huge, that we couldn't even assume just sitting within the 4 walls as a tester. Most of our tests were driven by automation. We had automation driven at multiple levels, like from the unit tests were written. Our basic coverage was at least 80% when it comes to unit tests. And we had integration tests. We had something called module test. And we also had the process integration test, everything pretty much covered in automation. But automation helped us to keep our checks sane, but it didn't help us find new bugs. So in search of new bugs, here comes our story. Was there a solution? Can we do something about it? That was the question that we had in the wider team. So what we did is all QAs together, we decided to have a good brainstorming session. We're going to shake up our brains and come up with some new ideas. Let's see how it's going to work for us. Or is it that we have completely stopped thinking more creative, or our application has become so stable that we don't have to worry. We have become like a superhumans kind of a development team that we no more have any issues at all. So when we did the brainstorming, the main idea was just to throw up all the ideas onto the whiteboard without any judgment. And all the details that I'm showing here in this slide is mostly on an example basis and not directly from the details that we had when we did the brainstorming, but pretty much these were the top few things that caught our eye and we considered for the further analysis. So when we did the brainstorming, we just put up everything on there into the whiteboard, no matter how silly, how good, how bad it is, or how stupid it is, we just talked our mind onto the board. And we grouped the ticket on the similar ideas. We did further filtering and we picked up the top 3 things that mattered to us, which was the test frequency, the domain expertise, and the incidents. So why this mattered to us was, like I said, it was a feature intensive and domain specific kind of an application that we were driving, which means we need to have a good business knowledge about that application. Our end users were B2B and they know exactly for what they're using this application and we don't have to educate them for what they need. So it was quite a challenge for us in all the ways. So when we did this, after the top 3 tickets, we chose one thing. We looked up to incidents or the internal bugs. So when we came to the issues, it was not just about the production issues, but also the internal issues that we tried to focus and churn out more details step by step. The first thing that we did was take the bug history for the last 6 to 8 months and then look it up for the various details that we can find out. It's basically bug synthesis is what we did. The first thing we did was to label it, to see from which area this is coming from. Like I already said, we had multiple modules that was communicating with each other. We had a finance module, we had sales module, we had warehouse module, we had quality management module, all of these modules interacting with each other to set up an entire enterprise solution. So we had to find out from where particular issue is stemming from. So we labeled those issues and we were able to deep dive a little bit more to understand why this issue is also coming up. So it's like, let's say a root cause analysis was done. Was it because of the type of the data? Was it because, is it an ask for the new feature? Is it because our documentation was not good enough? It can be any, it can range from anywhere. So we did 2 main things. One is the labeling and the other one is the root cause analysis to see from where this issue is actually stemming from and why this issue is stemming from. When we did this, the bug distribution spoke to us. It was, of course, not equally distributed. It was heavily skewed, and we could see some bugs were coming heavily from certain modules quite frequently, and there were some modules which was not even touched. This opened up a lot more doors and understanding for us when we saw this. Why? Because we were fitting very much within the Pareto principle, where our 80% of the application was not even used and 80% of bugs were coming from our 20% of the application or the features that we have given to the customers. So which basically meant we have been focusing on the entire part of the application unnecessarily and trying to bring in all sorts of tests. Trust me, we were doing accessibility, we were doing unit tests, we used to do automation, functional tests, regression tests, and that sounds pretty painful already, isn't it? So we had a 3-week cycle, a delivery cycle, where the last week was meant to be for regression testing. In this short week of 1 week, we had to cover up the entire area of functionalities and also find out new areas which we are even not aware of was a challenge for us. So when we plotted these bugs and we analyzed these bugs in more detailed manner, we could identify that the 20% of the more focused features are frequently visited, and it's been used day in, day out by our customers, irrespective of the domain, whether it's from professional services or from warehouse management or transportation management. It can be from anywhere, but it's this 20% of the feature which has been frequently hit. And this 80% of the feature was kind of visited on a seasonal basis, either because they are setup kind of features or annual maintenance kind of features. And it can be anything, but they were rarely used, or maybe customer just wasn't so excited to use all the features that we were trying to provide to them. So when we did this, those 20% of the features, we were able to list it down. This is some of the few. This does not speak the entire list. So just to give you a heads up, it can be as simple as a save to as big as document conversion or the payment module. Everything that was involved and was where they had a frequent hit was being captured. But we had to focus only to do the bug mining on this 20% and not for the rest of the 80%. Why? Why? Because this mattered to us. Test what matters should have been our principle, but rather what we were trying to do is to get our hands into everything, to the deep, wide ocean, and trying to find bugs everywhere, which does not even matter to the customer and is not being used. So we now had a window to understand where we have to focus more and what we have to achieve, which was pretty much narrowed down to the 20% of the features. This is a simple slide just to show you that the 80% how we handle and the rest 20% how we handle. The 80% of the application features, we tried to cover it up with our automation, which gave us a stable ground to move ahead, so that we don't have to worry about okay, whether something is working or not, or is this code is gonna break up the existing functionality, which is sparsely used by the customer, but still we have to support that it has to keep up and running. So we heavily dependent on the automation. We had a good coverage with regards to unit tests. We had a good coverage with regards to API, we aimed at 100% coverage. And whereas the end-to-end integration or the UI level of tests, we limited to 75% because it was getting flaky and also maintenance was pretty high. The rest 20% where we wanted to do more bug mining to overcome this pesticide paradox, and on analyzing the bugs, we could find out that there are two main reasons why this was coming up. The first one is the test data, the type of data that we were trying to use. We have to sauce it up. We have to do something more about it, which we are not even understood, but there can be more than that. The next is the user scenarios. We were trying to execute only the scenarios up to our understanding, and we never forayed into find out beyond our lines. It spoke to us on to important stuff. So we took this forward. So first we did again an analysis on our test data. We understood that we have three types of data, which is the master data, transactional data, and semi-transactional data. Just for the benefit of the wider group, I will let you know what is transactional data. Any data which triggers the change in the application state, we call it as a transaction data. It helps you to move a part of application from one state to another. And this will help you in a usual flow of the application. It can be as simple as your search or a filter, or it can be as complex as your payment, credit card details, or tax codes, or discount codes, or it can be anything. And the beauty of this data is it can be used again and again, or they can be generated pretty quick. So this transactional data that we were using were very limited. Let me say, for example, sale order. When we create a sale order, we were using only 10 items to create and to check if the application is working fine. But when in the actual scenario, the customer were using 1,500 line items in a sale order to place an order at the vendor site, which we never took into account. And also the type of details that used to create the units, the measurements, the conversions, the data spread huge. So we had to come up with more creative ways of identifying this data and come up with a volume. The third part is also, which I didn't mention, is a frequency. Not all type of details or data is used all across the year. We saw the usage of the discount codes and tax code generation mostly on the year end or during the Thanksgiving time, because then all the applications or the places where the sale was happening more, they were hitting our database and hitting our applications to generate more discount codes, or to file their taxes and things like that, especially the finance controller kind of roles. So we sassed up a little bit. We changed the way we were working with our transactional data, and we could see those scenarios which we had not seen before. And we could see the places where it was failing pathetically, not just from the functional perspective, but also from the performance perspective. So this worked a little bit for us. The second is the master data structure. So what is a master data? It's pretty much like in an enterprise solution, it speaks the blueprint of an application or blueprint of an organization. You have an organization and then you have different departments, and each department's doing some specific work. Our entire application is mapped across to its to this org structure, and we had more modules supporting each of these org structure. Now, this org structure was different for different companies. It was not the same. So this is one example structure, and this is one other. So when we saw how our customer were using, each company structure was very different. And what we used to do in our test environment is have a standard structure as an example company structure, and then work across our way, creating our own search, sale orders, payment orders, and a goods issue. I mean, these are some things which as a functionality we used to do, but we used to do on a, what they say, on an example structure, which was working fine. But when we started to change the company structure every 6 months, we could see the layering ran more deeper and more wider. So this helped us uncover those places which we never forayed into. We were thinking, okay, 3 layers, 4 layers of an organization is good enough. And then these communicating with each other with a finance module or our sales order module, it's good enough, but that was not actually the truth. It used to go anywhere from 1 to 15 layers as a hierarchy down below. And in the entire hierarchy, we had to ensure the data is being moved. There's upward movement and also the downward movement. And we could bring in this aspect of testing only by understanding that we have to change the master data as well. There may be an organization where things would have set up already and you'll be working on the same details again and again. I always recommend that if you can change the configuration details regularly, this helps you bring in new aspects in your tests and also uncover those scenarios which you would have not thought before. This definitely helped us. So initially we started with 6 months, bi-yearly or half-yearly. Every 6 months we used to change the org structure and run our applications. But then slowly we started realizing the benefits that it could get us. And then we started changing every quarterly. This is a manual intensive work, because it's something that you have to first draw it on your paper, identify what departments you want to do, then plot it across, put it in the system, make the structure. So this was quite a work, but it was worth all the effort. The second thing that I spoke about was the scenarios. The scenarios is usually what happens in enterprise solutions is we try and execute those test cases which we already know. And we think, okay, we have pretty much covered all the scenarios and it's working fine. But when we see from the customer's perspective, the interaction with our application was way too different. Their understanding of our application was way too different. We thought we are giving a document verification or a zipping kind of features for certain reasons, maybe to send a mail to a colleague or for the approval, but they were using entirely for a different purpose altogether. Just for the storage, just for the reference, just as an attachment. So there were unaccounted scenarios that we started realizing down the line. And how we did this is we did something called passive observation. In our company, we did something called customer engagement initiative. And in this 6 days, we just call up the customers, pull up our application, and then ask them to use it however they do it on a day-to-day basis. This is one thing. The second thing is we used to walk in to their office. just sit behind them and passively observe what they are doing and how they're interacting with the application, make notes of it. Then we come back to our team, exchange the ideas and let them know, okay, this particular feature, like a search or a document generation, we are assuming that we use it for so and so purpose, but the sales head used it for so and so purpose. So that gave up more details and more scenarios for us to understand from the real world aspect. Now, this is all good, but we had to implement it in some way, but we didn't know how to move forward. So first we came up with something called process integration test. It looks something like this. It's not the actual process integration test, but it looked something similar. In the process integration test, the main thing is to explain the business scenario for what we are trying to address, and then what is the goal that we are trying to achieve, the user or the personas who are involved in it. And we clearly noted which role is involved, what are their tasks or what they have to do, and then the entire flow journey to achieve the goal that is being mentioned in the document, which is good. Now this was scripted. We had two ways to do. One, same person assuming different roles and doing it, which is kind of boring. But then we came up with another idea that we share the script across the team, irrespective of which role they are, whether it's a developer, tester, knowledge management, UX, whoever would like to participate, we would just share around what we call process integration test cases and ask them to involve. This was like a 2-hour time-bound activity. We asked them to get involved and then start interacting with our application based on the steps that we have given. Now, if we continue the same process over a period of time, again, we'll end up doing the pesticide paradox. So we were very careful in jumping away at some point and not be too scripted over a period of time. So when most of the team members could get their head around, kind of understand the processes from the customer perspective, we kind of ditched the script and it became more of an impromptu way of handling things. So if I am taking a role as a financial controller, this time in the next sprint, I will move on as a purchase head or I'll move on as a warehouse controller. So each time I will bring in a fresh perspective for some different module and not for the same module that I'm working in. So in this way, we were able to provide our feedback and mine more bugs over a period of time, not sticking to the same one particular module that we have been working for last 6 months and kind of getting adapted to the screen and the error messages or the behavior of the application. To do this, we also had to create enough data. Like, for example, if you see the 1,500 motor production items, so if you had to have a line items of 1,500, creating this manually is just not the same way. So we depended heavily on automation to create this test data and also all the discount codes that we wanted, all the SKUs as well. So most of our test data preparation was driven by automation. But what we were trying to achieve doing manually was mine more bugs by bringing in the fresh perspective and not get stuck to the same place and doing the same button click to check the same error messages. This kind of helped us to a large extent. We reached all the corners that we never assumed of, just sitting at our desks and kind of clicking the same buttons and saying or verifying the messages. We unearthed those scenarios which we kind of never assumed or which we never thought about. The last thing that actually helped us a bit was crowd testing. This is a very creative thing that we took. We initially decided, let us do. And let's say we took a chance, but it worked for us wonderfully well. So what is this crowd testing? In the crowd testing, it is a timed activity. We identify the time either in part of hours or in the number of days that we would like to run. And then frequency of this test, was it half yearly or quarterly? But the main part of this crowd testing is the name says crowd. The crowd does not mean any general public who would like to come in and try to do the testing. This is a good idea for those where B2C is involved, but ours is mostly B2B. So we had to bring in some people who already have the domain knowledge, who already understand the application, who know how to interact with the application and kind of understand how the data movement is happening. So if I'm moving a discount code from the sale order to the purchase order or to a, I don't know, to a requisition document, I should be able to understand why this is happening. So picking up the people who can do this was actually the main challenge for us. And then this was not a test where we told you have to raise the bugs and you have to log the bugs to ensure there is, new things are found and things like that. But it was mostly on an exploratory approach where we used to call people and do an observation of the application and our modules, how they're interacting, what they understand by doing this. And at the end of the day, they used to send over the recommendations for us or the observations. So when they did, we had to, the main challenge when they send over their recommendations or the observations was we had to really sit and understand what was in their mind when they send this observation to us. Is it an improvement, or they found it as a bug, or it can be any aspect of it. It's a whole gamut of activities that they were doing while exploring stuff. So in the crowd testing, the major challenge that we also had was pricing. If we involved additional or external people, we had to pay them on a per hour basis. So this is, like I said, is a resource intensive. If the company is in favor, you should definitely try it. But what we also initially did as a baby step was involve product managers and from the neighboring teams or the team members who had left our team or moved on to join another team because they had a prior understanding of the module. We were able to easily rope in those candidates and then get this test done. But when we start seeing things were moving and the ball was rolling, we kind of opened it for the wider crowd, customers, vendors, suppliers, whoever was involved with the application, whoever was consuming our application on their day-to-day basis. We opened up our channels and they kind of registered and they were more eager to come and participate because they wanted to be the first one to understand what is that we are trying to offer to the market. So this kind of worked to us. We also had to be very mindful that we are not bringing in anybody into the group, and it's not gonna give us a right kind of a feedback or observation details. So we had to be very mindful each sprint. What was our sprint goal? What is the kind of output that we are trying to deliver as a value to the customer, and identify the roles who would be involved directly or indirectly, rope them in, and then get this test ball rolling. So the last point that I would like to highlight in the crowd testing is it's not just the features or the functions, but we could improve the application overall from the performance, from the documentation, from the understanding. And when we came up with acceptance criteria for the tests, after seeing how crowd is interacting with their application, we kind of thought we have to bring in more details into our acceptance criteria as a done criteria for that story. And in this way, this crowd testing helped us to improve as a team together and application as a whole. Yeah. After all these things, okay, so there was one other thing which I forgot to mention was the role of automation again. Since we were doing this on a regular basis, every sprint, on the third week of every sprint, we had to come up with the user details, test data, blah, blah, everything has to be set up, which is again a laborious task. So we automated all of those aspects. We just have to trigger out to create a new data every time, fresh data every sprint, keep the test bed ready, and just involve people to come and do the observations whenever they want. Okay, so that was a lot of talking which I did. It may have sounded interesting or it may have sounded very boring. In whatever the spectrum part of you are, but I would also like to tell or introduce you to the challenges that we had. It was not all the cakewalk for us all along the way. The main challenge that we had was with regards to the test documentation. Initially, we had a very sparse documentation because we were heavily dependent on automation tests. So pretty much all the heavy lifting of regression was taken care by the automation. And we kind of used acceptance criteria itself as a backdrop for us to create the automation scripts. But when we started foraying into different worlds or different aspects of testing, documentation was the base, or like a kind of a bed that we had to support, and we need to have to involve more people apart from the team members or engage them. We started working on to improve our documentation. Second thing is identifying the right group. It may be from the user persona testing or from the crowd testing. I had to involve the right set of people. Otherwise, it's going to be more challenging. Most of our time used to be like a babysitting, helping them understand what is this button, what would that data do, where is this screen going. So identifying the right set of people every sprint was a challenge for us. The third one was a common time slot. Not everyone was available at the same time that we were looking for. So sometimes we had to mend our times to get people's time. Sometimes we just had to let go and then do with whatever we have. A kind of, we had to balance between these two worlds, their availability and kind of people that we were trying to rope in. And all these activities were time bound because it was a manual activity. It was a manual test. We couldn't run the entire thing forever. So because then again, we'll end up doing the pesticide paradox. So it has to be time bound, either in days or in hours. So usually crowd testing was anywhere between 2 to 2.5 days, and user persona testing was max 2 hours or 3 hours and nothing beyond that. So everything was time bound. So which means we had to be well planned all our tasks. The last one is reporting. When we were engaging so many crowd, we were bringing in so many people and a fresh perspective and observations, it was also important that we speak to the upper management of what is the value that all these activities are bringing us, or is it even working, or is it just we are throwing stone in the dark? So reporting was one important aspect that we had to bring. And now since the output of all these activities were different, it was not the same. Like I said, the goal of the crowd testing was to basically do the observation on an exploratory approach, whereas a user persona testing was to identify all the areas which we kind of skipped or we never assumed of. So the reporting was one other, I wouldn't say as a challenge, but we had to be more creative in how we are representing the entire gamut of these activities and the output of these activities. But the silver lining is we failed, we tried, and we tried over again, and it worked for us. It's not just these three, but we tried much more than this, some even crazy ideas that we tried, but it didn't work for us. Sorry, it failed very pathetically for us. But these three gave flying results, and we were able to really arrest the pesticide paradox. One other important thing I would like to tell is not all of this was introduced at the same time. Like I said, we had 2 weeks development period and 1 week regression. So in this regression, once if we use user persona testing, the next we used to play around with our test data. And maybe next sprint we used to involve, then it would be a quarterly cycle. We used to involve crowd test and then flip back to the user persona test. Sometimes 2 tests clubbed together, depending on how intense this feature was. So this really helped us to bring in the fresh perspective, and we could mine more bugs and we could find those areas which we never assumed of. So saying that, that's pretty much our entire journey, which I tried to club in 30 minutes and try to run pretty quick. Maybe if you have any questions, I will hand over to Praveen.
Awesome. Thanks. Thank you, Sowmya. I think just quickly, excuse me, before we get into Q&A, I think it would be good. We're just going to have the team raise another poll question. If you could just take a moment to help us understand. I think we're basically, if you want anybody from BrowserStack to get in touch with you regarding scaling your automated tests, let us know. Our team will reach out to you shortly to help you get set up. All right, so let me go back to sharing my screen and we can address some of these questions. Okay. Awesome. First off, thank you, Sowmya. I think very, very interesting. I think the pesticide paradox is fascinating. And I think we have a lot of sort of interesting questions. So we'll try to go through these as quickly as we can. So the first one is, how did you identify your 20% that you talked about in the beginning? And based on the Pareto principle, what were the techniques you used?
So how did we identify? Like I said, we labeled each of the bugs that came in. We had multiple modules. The modules ranged anywhere from 20 to 25. It was a huge solution. So whichever the bug we're trying to synthesize, the first thing we did was label to see from which module or from which application this is coming in. So in this way, when we map, so if we have 25 features and then vis-a-vis to the number of features which was hitting more bugs, then it's a basic math. You can get to know how much percentage of your application is actually being frequently used and where are these bugs coming from.
Awesome. Okay, next question is deleting old test cases required to overcome this paradox or anything?
So deletion of the test cases are good if it is a sunset project. Like, for example, if there is an old legacy system which you are trying to upgrade and it's no more required and those features are dying, then please do delete. But that is not the case, but you have been enhancing it over a period of time, which is the whole sense of agile, then editing is the best option that should be chosen. Unless the feature is completely removed from the application, please do not delete the test case.
Got it. I think the next question is specific to BrowserStack. Do we support screenshot testing for mobile apps? Not yet. Something that we are considering for the roadmap. Does BrowserStack support full automate support Selenium 4? Yes, we do. You can check out our docs. We've got full support for Selenium 4 on BrowserStack. Let me try and address as many of these as possible. Okay. I'm going to skip the first one. I'm moving on to the next one, which is, do you try to automate the defects coming from production so that they will, so you make sure they will not happen again in the future?
Yes, we did. And it's a great question. Thank you for asking. We did automate, but we were not crazy enough to automate every production bug that's coming our way. We kind of weighed which among these are very important. Going back to our Pareto analysis, 80-20, if it is falling within the 20 range, we used to go ahead and immediately just cover it up because we know that's something which all our customers will be stepping in today or tomorrow, and they will be using it anyways. So we just had to ensure that does not repeat and cause an inconvenience for them. But if it's falling within the 80%, we still had time, we can breathe, and we really had time to see the priority of should we have to automate it, or is it something, is it an annual activity which a company is doing, and then we can support it in some other way. So we used to kind of draw the balance.
Got it. Okay, couple of questions even in the chat around crowd testing, like when should we start crowd testing? How do you write scenarios for cloud testing? How do you manage that whole process?
Okay, so in our case, the application was pretty stable and huge, and it was not a fresh application. Like, it was not a startup kind of a scenario. We were an enterprise solution. And like I said, it was a feature intensive, domain rich application. So we had the history of 5 years already in the market, which thousands of customers already using. So if it is such a backdrop, then you can start away your crowd test immediately if you already identify the user personas with whom you want to interact to get the observations. But if you are a startup, if you're coming from the startup or a pre-startup, please do not foray into the crowd testing. It just derails you from the existing path. So the simple answer is, if you are there in the market, customers already using huge enterprise B2B applications, then just go ahead, kick off with your crowd tests.
Okay. Okay, I think a question that popped up, do you think the shift right approach would help overcome this pesticide paradox?
Is it a shift right or a shift left? Shift right is towards production. Do you mean that should we have to test during production?
I think that's what they're asking, yeah, in production.
If you ask me, I kind of say no. And I think it's a kind of a bad practice. instead of using a back practice, not a recommended solution that you do everything on a right shift. So try to do as much left while getting the experience from the right shift approach, like how the users are using in production. If you kind of understand that, bring it to the left shift approach and try to implement it so that next time in your next iteration, you're giving a more stable code. And we ourselves also understand the application more deeper than we think. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, awesome. Which test management tool are you using to manage?
Okay, so no, we stuck to Jira, but then we had integration with our automation tools. So it's pretty much Jira going ahead, and we integrated the Jira with our BrowserStack, and then we used to report all the automation bugs and also our manual bugs in the same place.
Got it. Awesome. Okay, the next question: how do you handle the changes in the state of the test data post the testing? So when you're tearing down your test cases.
How did you handle the changes and state of the test data post the testing? Okay, which test data are you talking about? Is it a transactional data or is it a master data? Because like I said, in our case, it was both these places. We kind of had completely ignored master data, which is like a one-time setting up an entire company structure, which was not possible through automation. So we had to set it up manually, which involved multiple modules. And since it is a dynamic setup, each time maybe once I think of a professional industry, and next time I think of a sales company or an advertising company, and all these companies have a different structure. So if I'm dealing with a master data, it's mostly manual, and we never used to tear it down, because kind of we can reuse this data again after 6 months when we wanted some other fresh perspective. But if you're talking with regards to automation, it was mostly transactional data. And once this data is created and is being used, we had a flag in the backend. If they use data, then we had a flag which was ticked. Then we had a garbage collection happening every 15 days or something, which deletes these data and then erases and makes space for the new data again. I hope that's what you were expecting.
Yeah, makes sense. Can we overcome pesticide paradox in Selenium? I think.
Yeah, thanks, my friend. So this is what I'm trying to also tell you, that automation is meant to live the pesticide paradox. Automation should never be used to mine new bugs. They are used to ensure the health check of your application and not to find new defects every time. But if there is a defect in the existing feature that is already released to the market, then you have to ensure that you're covering your paths and identify these bugs early. So if you're planning to do overcoming the pesticide paradox in Selenium, I wouldn't say, or at least from my understanding, is not a right approach. This is something that you still have to run manually.
Got it. Okay. What bug reporting tools? I think you answered that you're using. I guess you're using Jira, right, to file your bugs and.
Yes, everything was Jira for us. Yeah, one-stop destination.
Is BrowserStack preparing? Yes, we are preparing. I can't share dates with you folks right now, but definitely work in progress. Next question: how do you calculate your API automation coverage?
For the API automation, we used to use our own internal tools, which is written by our own developers. So it was not open source. We had an in-house code coverage tool that we use, that we had prepared. So yeah, we had the coverage being checked.
Got it.
Our own libraries, yes.
Interesting question. What if you don't have many bugs in your application to begin with? That's a great place to be. But how do you find 20%?
Okay, what if you don't have many bugs in your application to begin with? How can we find the 20% and use this method? Okay, so I'm kind of guessing that, is it something that you're starting off new, or is it a new team? So in that case, you have to, in our case, for us, the bed was the test data, the bug data that we had, which we synthesized to know. And it gave us a good touch points to where we have to see. If the application is starting new and you're foraying new into the testing, I would say keep a close eye on the production and internal incidents both. They speak a lot. It pretty much reflects the user user behavior and also the test behavior. So they can speak a lot of things. The first thing is you need to have your test cases. So please keep it so that you can map it, or at least have labels for all these components. So you can always come up with the coverage of your functionalities.
Okay. Awesome. I think in terms of sharing slides and notes, I think what we will do, folks, is we will be sharing the video. So, I think you can go through all of the entire talk by going through the video on our YouTube channel. Role-based test scenarios, were they also automated, and did the automation suite grow measurably or immeasurably in just a few sprints?
It did. It did. So in this whole slide, maybe I did a very bad job of not explaining about our automation. We had a very good automation suite from the unit test to the end-to-end integration test. We also involved the user process integration test, which is the user journey that we just mentioned. But one thing that we were very mindful of is we didn't involve all the user journeys. It was a team discussion of which user journeys that we would like to keep checking every sprint and just ensure that is working. Anything that is finance related, anything that is security related, anything that is heavily data related, which can pull down or tear down the entire company, those are sensitive, and those sensitive features were automated as a part of our end-to-end or a user journey kind of a concept. But we didn't overgrow. If I'm right, and if I can pull my data, I think we had 82 scenarios. Yeah, 82 scenarios covered as part of our automation user journey.
Got it. Got it. How do you make, any ideas on how to make device testing coverage more efficient? So how do you decide on what devices to test on, I guess is the question. What is the right mix of devices to test on? Okay, so I can share you my personal way of dealing with this. So what we do is we jump onto our analytics tool. I see my customer base, what they are using. Even today, if I log into my system in my present company to see 67% of our present customers are using Chrome with the latest version. And then there is a 15% who are using Safari. And then the rest of it is broken down into Firefox and other browsers, or IE11 other browsers. Likewise, same our app. We have something like a review app. We see which devices and which browsers. So if there is no customers who are on Android device, there is no point in me investing time in testing the Android device, right? So I always depend on the data. So I go back to my analytics tool to see my customer base, what they're doing. Accordingly, I'll plan my test strategy for these cross-device and cross-browsers. And is there a cutoff point, Sowmya, like especially in Android, you have a long tail of, you have thousands of different devices, right, around the world. Yeah. So you will have a very long list of different Android devices, but maybe a few being used in the top 50%, let's say. Mm-hmm. How do you sort of determine the cutoff? Would you use any thresholds internally to determine, okay, beyond this, we won't test? Yes, it's again the usage. When you look back into the analytics tool, it will tell you the viewport size, the type of device, and which device they have been using. It all thanks to our tags. We also implement tags to collect all these information. So when we do it, we know it's very clear to us which devices, which viewports our customers are using. So I will restrict. Now, let's say it's growing beyond our limits, like the 15 devices or 20 devices coming up. I would group them based on certain details. It may be the OS versions or the viewport sizes, and then I'm going to test. Otherwise, it sounds crazy to cover up everything. It's not possible. Right. Not even in automation. It sounds crazy. Sure. Okay, I think we have a couple of minutes left, so let's try to get a couple more questions. And so when we automate everything on redaction, do you think that will also create pesticide paradox situation? You're living the pesticide paradox actually when you automate. So the whole reason, the goal of automation is to ensure a health check of the application, just to say it's not breaking anywhere and you're still doing justice, keeping it up and running. And the whole goal of automation is not
to mine the bugs, which I've been telling in the entire slide process. So keep your automation running. I'm not really sure if everything that you should be automating. I'm not from that part of the world who believe in 100% automation is going to resolve your problem. Be a mindful automation person. Identify those things that your customer is using, what matters to them, and please automate only those so that you can keep track of them, and invest your time in something that's more creative, where you need a human aspect of it, rather than clicking the same buttons to find the same error or the same success message.
Cool. Awesome. I think let's call it a day. We've got a lot of questions, but I think we're out of time. Thank you all for attending, and thank you, Sowmya. I think definitely I can see from all the questions that you touched a nerve. I think a lot of people care very deeply about the pesticide paradox and how to solve that problem. So I think it was great to see the journey that your team took and that you took to try and solve this problem. So thank you for enlightening us. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today.
Thank you so much, people, for everybody who took time to listen to me. It's an honor. Thank you.
Thanks, Sowmya. And thanks everyone for joining. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.